No, it's all right.
Good afternoon and welcome to the, I think this is the 11th Big Picture webinar. I've got Gary with me, who's a colleague of mine. So if you're watching on the recording and we do anything by making and doing in the session, because this is what it's all about, Gary will be able to interact with me as we go through. If you're watching the recording, clearly just ping me, send me a question. The theme of this is all about elevating engagement with a millennial mindset. The words there chosen very carefully because with the millennial mindset suggested to me when I started looking at this area that you needed to be born within that particular age group. But if you've been following my articles this week, what I've found is actually the reverse of that is true, which is my related experience is that you don't necessarily need to be born in that age group. It's actually more of a mindset thing related to growth mindset and the like. And there are certain features of that I'm going to go into as I start the webinars with a related experience. We're then going to go into a practical exercise. So if you have Gary in front of you, got the piece of paper or the prop or something to write on, you can follow along as I'm kind of going through the little practical exercise, which is where we'll take things. Just from a kind of logistics perspective, we're in Zoom. It's a great bit of software. You've got a gallery view at the top. Gary, if you want to use it, or speaker view, which highlights, I always record and actually go along with the gallery view just so I can see everybody's faces. And it's great you've got your camera on because that really helps. There is a chat window to the right if you want to use it and leave me a message. Because it's just the two of us, if you want to indicate in any way you've got something to mention, then that would be fantastic. It is quite fast paced. It's intended to be so. It's just less than half an hour. It is an insight, so it's a bit niche in I've been watching some American webinars today, so niche is what they say. It's niche in two respects. One is it's a quick insight because we haven't got long, and secondly, there are many ways to elevate engagement for the millennial mindset. This is my experience of what I've done in the past with and without using the tool that I own and have developed, which is Big Picture, which is the prop for which you can see behind me. So I would like you to follow along. If you're watching a recording, get a piece of paper in front of you. There is, if I prepared for this properly, a little layout on the screen, which I'll actually do up here, which is if you've just got a piece of paper, then just draw out a bit of a pattern on the piece of paper, which has got your operations box at the center of the page. That's the word operations there, with a yellow line or any form of line running left to right across the page. And if you just prepare that with a bit of space at the top to write the purpose of the organization that we're going to feature, then that will help. And you can prepare that whilst I'm just going through a bit of related experience. So it's based on the article I put out there this week. What I do always try to do with Big Picture is to simplify complex things so people can understand them in a different way that allows them to lurch forward with the way they do their work. What I found with the millennial mindset, there are two main aspects to it. One is a big sense of self. What that means is, and it can be sometimes seen in a negative way, but I don't think so, we're all out in a way for ourselves. We all have a need, if you like, to want to have our own view of the point of perspective of the business, and we all put ourselves at that center and we want to face outwards from there. So in terms of sense of self, we've got our personal development, our needs for personal development put at the center of everything we do. And this is if you do have a millennial mindset, you will see this characteristic that you want to see personal development in pretty much all the work that you do. You seek to demonstrate your own values, so we're all made up differently. And it's best, in my experience, with a millennial mindset, if you have those own values interwoven into the work that you do on a day-to-day basis. So you might be aware of what those values are, or you might not be, but it's good that you're wanting to demonstrate those on a day-to-day basis. And you want to develop relationships and collaborate. And I think this doesn't make a millennial mindset different to anybody else. It's just a mindset that is quite natural and primal, but probably in organizations in the past, it hasn't been allowed to prosper and encouraged because it's got the hierarchy and some restrictions in place. From your perspective, Gary, is that kind of experience you've had from a millennial? Do you recognize anybody when I describe those characteristics?
Yes, I do actually. But it's. I think it's funny when you look at age demographics and the conversation between all those age demographics, because it you see it all over the press at the moment about millennial this and millennial that and how they're so different. But correct me if I'm wrong. Throughout history, there's always been an older tail of the workforce and a younger tail of the workforce, and those demographics have got very different needs. The older demographic is working towards the coming to the end of their careers, and those in the younger demographic are just starting theirs, and the need are very different. But I completely agree with your point about values and purpose. So I through my experience and my own sort of views as well, is I run my own company now, and I've done for a few years. But when I was an employee, I wanted to know not just that I was going to get paid at the end of the month. That's kind of a given. I wanted to know that the role that I was playing in an organisation was going to have an impact on the greater good, and have a positive impact on hopefully onto society. And I think that's a common value held by younger people. These, in these days. And so I completely agree. Completely agree with what you're saying.
There's a view, Gary, and I met another colleague, Julia Felton, who you might know this week, and it was excellent, because I went along thinking I would find out so much stuff it would cause me a bit of a roadblock in what I needed to do in the week. But actually, she validated and confirmed, almost like she'd watched the same references, and that wasn't actually the case, which gave me a sense of confidence that there is this clear view that they're not necessarily different. That mindset isn't necessarily different. It's where a lot of people start on their working journey, and it's actually their experience of what does, or more importantly, what doesn't happen to them on that journey that kind of knocks it out of them. So we should all have an expectation that we can have that sense of self. It's a very human attribute to want that, and while I've been incredibly excited by doing this research this week and what's going to happen next year for Big Picture Offering in terms of people development programs and graduate onboarding, is that giving the voice to the employee at whatever age they are gives them this chance, and giving them the voice and allowing them to tell their own story is right at the center of Big Picture, which we'll get onto in the kind of practical exercise. Yeah. So I just want to hold that thought. Yeah. There's so many thoughts that kick off, and if we've got time at the end, we'll do it. You mentioned, I want to pick up a theme about the organization. So what we've talked about so far is like inside out, a sense of self, starting with the individual and working outwards from there. If we flip that around, what I found in my research was that it moved on to, in what environment does that individual want to work? And this is the outside in, this is the organizational environment. So what you did there, and I picked up on it, is you took the sense of self, but then you flipped it around into the organization in which you work, you sought certain things. And maybe the reason you've done what you've done, and in a way I have, and other people in my network have, is because they're not getting their needs met in the corporate ecosystem in which they're working. And therefore, moving on to the organization, it's an organization that would encourage a two-way dialogue. So if we're looking to elevate engagement with that millennial mindset, and I'm almost going away from that term in the next few weeks and months, I might actually talk about a different kind of mindset because of the associations with age. It's the mindset that is one of growth. It's one of the Deloitte Human Trends Social Enterprise Report talks about in terms of the changing needs of the workforce. It's what your workforce as human beings want, rather than it just being millennial. Yeah. So it's a two-way dialogue. What I also found was it's an organization that is evolving the hierarchy. So what they'll do is they'll put the right team together to get the job done, as opposed to looking for a hierarchical command and control structure. And a millennial mindset will seek those organizations, and often, like we've done, we often do that by jumping out of a corporate system and actually seeking that meritocracy or that collaboration and those relationships like we do in our networks. We do that, and it's easier to do that as your own business.
Yeah, and I think what really what separates new people coming into the workforce these days, and that in the past is connectivity. So new people, the younger generation have grown up with the iPhone. They've grown up with social media. They've grown up with the internet, and connectivity is just the norm now. Whereas, and I'm 33, but I'm old enough where I remember time before the internet, pre-Windows 95, and technology that came from that. So I think today's workforce, and today's younger workforce especially, expect that kind of connectivity within the organization. And if you've got elements where people can voice their opinions, you mentioned voice, where people can voice their opinions online, whether it be a social media channel, or whether it be Glassdoor, as rating their employer, and any other alternative. I think they require that same opportunity within the organisation to be able to voice their opinions without the risk of being penalised for doing so. Yeah, and I think that's a real differential between today's younger workforce and the younger workforce 20 years ago, and further on. It's a real differentiator to that. And I think what you said about organisation, we use, as I mentioned, talked to you previously, we use the me, we, and us model to really get to the bottom of what a particular subject matter or a particular outcome means to each particular stakeholder. So you take well-being in my instance. What does well-being mean to me as an individual member of staff, regardless of age? What does well-being mean to my team? How can we better enable that? And then what does well-being mean to the organisation? And if we can answer with certainty the question for all those three stakeholders, then we're in a good starting point at least.
And what my observation is there, Gary, and I've just realised it in the way you've reframed it, is that that's in a way your version of the two-way dialogue, I think, because that's very much
so, yeah.
That's very much a structure.
Yeah, very much so.
And something, and I've just realised that. So I think that's where the things come together. Two-way dialogue has got to be good. My observation is it often takes time, and you have to be smart how you introduce that. You're doing it via that framework. I'm doing it via a tool. But anything that gets that conversation going is a good thing. So I just want to move on to the practical exercise.
Yeah, definitely.
The last thing on the organisation piece is a kind of a clear sense of purpose, which you passionately believe is a force for good, which I think you also touched on as well. You wanted to see that demonstrated, that what you were doing and your values was actually contributing to a clear sense of purpose for the business, which is hopefully a force for good. And clearly you can't have all those things at one time. And when I was chatting to Chris, a colleague of mine earlier this week, I said, how many of these 6, if you like, as 2 times 3 did he score upon? He got 5. I think the last one around the values, it's like you can't have everything, but you get a pretty high score. And that's where elevating engagement for that mindset should be sought, and the massive rewards for that in terms of productive employees. And also they stay longer and they don't need to jump around, because that's a new thing in the workforce. They can probably move around. There's more mobility in the workforce. There's alternative ways of contracting. So I'm really keen to move on in the last 10 minutes on to the practical exercise. I'm just going to share with you, Gary, if you haven't got the actual prop up, just let me go into full screen. So if I just share with you this. So what if you've got a page in front of you, you'll see this board behind me. It's pretty much the same layout. I'm just going to follow through. The big picture kind of pattern works with a box approach across the page with the customer at the center. And what I want to do is just to give you an insight into how using big picture, do you take the sense of self and the two-way dialogue? How do you actually put that into practice? And this is a massive thing to try and do in 10 minutes, but I'm going to have a go at it. So firstly, this is our team symbol. This could be the individual in the organization. For this scenario, if you have someone in mind, it could be yourself or a colleague that you work with. In this example, I'm going to put this individual in operations. This is a conversation with this individual where this individual has this tool in front of them. So I would be facilitating a conversation. They would be expressing themselves, and I can't hit home that point more than being as clear as it can be that they are having this conversation. It's from their point of perspective. So this is this individual being given a chance to offer their voice and their story in the organization. So it's not the organization telling them, it's the organization or the team around them working with them for them to offer their voice. As you know, it's a kind of template that would be laid out in front of them on the paper, and it suddenly becomes a making and doing and a conversation coming from their point of perspective. These are the arrows coming out from their perspective. This is why it's an inside out pattern. It's this individual offering a view as to what they think from their perspective. If we just step through the strong sense of self, just to give you a clue as to how you can practically put this into perspective, I offer up this measure symbol that if you're doing some form of personal development, the conversation might go along the lines of, you're working in operations, how could your personal development be measured? And automatically they're doing it in the frame of the business. So immediately you've got a sense of, how do you see your personal development working? And what are the challenges? We have a challenge and opportunity symbol to say, what are the challenges and opportunities might you be facing and might be inhibiting or accelerating your personal development in the work that you do on a day-to-day basis? And how are you going to measure that? Because we have to know something is measured as kind of good, and we know how we're doing to be able to improve it. So what does good look like? We can also look at the kind of values that they have. So what we'd say to them is, if that's how you see yourself in the organization, what kind of values do you have? So you might be kind of creative, you might be like an ideas person. And if we look to kind of the third element is the relationship piece. If we know how they think about their personal development by using something tangible and physical that allows them to express themselves, we ask how they kind of measure it in terms of their personal development, what their values are, and what kind of relationships they would be wanting to encourage for themselves. Who do they want to be working with? And by connecting these two things together and isolating key elements of the business, what you are in fact doing is you're giving, as Big Picture does, the ability for that individual to tell their own story by giving them the props, the prompts, and the environment in which to express themselves, which could be a one-to-one or it could be in a small team. Now, I've gone through quite a bit there, Gary, and I want to get on to the kind of top-down organizational element perspective. How does that strike? I've gone through that quite quick. How do you kind of see that? Are there any points you'd like to pick up on?
No, I thought it was really clear. It was really good. Okay. So I think the important part of what you're doing here is putting the individual, really important to emphasize that, the individual in the center of the conversation. And I very much buy into that value, that sort of ethos. Yeah.
And I'll just share with you that if you can see that, Gary, I've just got the version on screen. You're putting that's the kind of clean version. You've got that individual right at the center, and you're working out from that. And I'm just gonna flip that around in the kind of time that we've got, which is, if we just move on to here, this next one, then what I'm just going to show you is how we then go on to the organizational element. So if we flip that round from an organizational perspective, you take that conversation and you engage then the organization. So this is a different mindset, a different room, a different team. And in order to encourage that two-way dialogue, let's revisit what we said before. A two-way dialogue is all about those relationships outside work. So if you're going to go here to the marketing team, have the conversation with the marketing team. If there's an opportunity for this individual to develop a relationship with the marketing team, then it's good to kind of flip it on its head and go over and speak to the marketing team. Now, there might be some challenges with that about how you're going to bring that team together in the right way to collaborate on a piece of work. But as you've said, just like we put the individual at the center of the conversation, if we're going to introduce someone in the marketing team, then we have to know our people and the challenges there. Going on from that, we have to have a clear purpose, and that's why you can see clear purpose at the top of the page there. That company and organization has to have a clear purpose, and there's got to be someone there that within the hierarchy who that individual can have that one-to-one conversation with, which in this case is the ops manager, and that should be clearly identified so that conversation can be progressed and encouraged. And I'm really aware of time, and I know you're busy at coming up. So I just want to reiterate the summary points just to reflect on. To elevate engagement for the millennial mindset, we're talking about two things: a sense of self with the individual right at the center, and we've gone through a little practical way of doing that. For the organization itself, it's outside in. It's got to be understanding, having a clear purpose and knowing your people and being able to provide that environment for that millennial mindset individual to be able to offer their ideas and be part of that two-way dialogue across the organization. And those are the 2 points in takeaway. So from a reflection overall perspective, Gary, back to the theme of elevating engagement for millennial, what do you think so far, and what do you think an interesting next conversation could be for individuals or organizations who are working or want to work in this way?
Good question. I'm aware that different demographics in the workforce have different values and different desires and different drivers to doing what they do within a job role. And I would be incredibly interested in how the millennial mindset differs from another mindset, and how an organization can can segregate in terms of that method of conversation, but also how an organization can look at those different types of people, those different types of mindset, and how they can utilize a tool like the big picture, how they can utilize that to find a common purpose across those different themes. And I think if you can once you can find that common purpose, then you're I think that opens up a plethora of opportunities to not only grow your business and grow your, through general business drivers, productivity, sales, whatever it is you're looking at, but also to drive the people agenda. Really answer that question. What's the driver for the organization? What's the driver for the individual? And where's that purpose in the center of that? I'd be really interested in that.
Yeah, and what I love about that is that the tool's one thing, but as you know, with any framework, it's the quality of the conversation. That is the point. It's getting that needle flickering. It's the quality of the conversation, and it's bringing people out their shells. And we've got different ways to do that. I think a very practical, tangible, explicit tool, because I'm quite a practical chap, is the way to do that. But what's interesting is the passion in everything we read and do. It's all about the conversation and including as many people in that, so they share as many useful truths, as I call it, in the available minutes that they've got. So if you go into work for this long, how many of those minutes are you spending useful truths? So there's loads we can do off the back of this. For people watching on the recording, just a reminder, Big Picture provides these kits, the workshops and the programs that wind all this thinking up and get people talking and engaged within a business. Equally, we can train you up to do this yourself, and there's different ways to do that. So please get in touch. I must say, Gary, thank you so much for giving up your time. I love the way you contribute.
No, it's pleasure.
Some of the feedback from previous webinars is that giving people that time to express themselves, even if it means a silence and a thought and a reflection, because I watch these back and that's where I learn and we move on together. And that's why I put myself out there doing these things, because those little connections and thoughts and reflections over the weekend for those both are really good, and then we'll pick up in due course. But we'll end it there because I know you pushed for time, and just thank you very much for your participation.
No, thank you.